So back to our RecyclerView adapter here. So we have our RecyclerView adapter constructor here, constructing our object. We have on create view holder. So this is where we are inflating our contact row here, XML, and we're returning it. But before we return anything, we're passing it via the view holder class, which was created at the bottom here. Now, this view holder class here, in conjunction with our onBind view, that's where things are going to happen. Now, let's work on our view holder class here, because think of this class here is a place where we can actually set things up from our contact row, meaning we can set up all of our views or all of our widgets we added. Think of it as when we come to our main activity, when we say, for instance, list view, find view by ID and pass the ID so that we can connect to the XML item we want to use, right? So it's the same thing that's happening here, except not inside of our activity, but we are doing inside of our RecyclerView. So that is what we're going to be doing here. So in fact, I'm going to come here and say, I'm going to make these public. So I want to be able to access them. I'm going to say text view. I'm going to say name, we'll do public again. Text view, call this phone number. What are these? Right, these are, again, these items that we have here. We don't need to look into this button here because I just wanted to show you the things that you can put inside of our row here. But if you want to, you can do. All right, so we have these two text view, name and phone number, which are going to be using soon. Now, it looks like our name is already used for some reason. It's very strange that it's actually highlighted like that. I'm going to call this contact name just to make sure. All right, much better. Very good. So now we have these instantiations here. That means inside now in view holder, when this is called, that's where we are going to set things up. So I'm going to say contact name first, and I'm going to go ahead and say find. Oops, I can't find view by ID. What's happening? Well, remember, the find view by ID, it's very easy to locate or to use because we are inside of a main in this case here. But at this point here, we're not inside of an activity, right? Are we? So in order for us to get to our item, to get to our instantiation, or to get to our find view by ID, we need to use the item view that we're passing here, because this view, remember, is the one that will know that we are actually talking about a view, which in this case is going to be a contact row. Does it make sense? Because remember, all of that has been passed through this view holder, which we are now looking at it, which we're now setting things up. So this view that is returned here that we're passing should know about this view that we added inside our own create view holder, right? So that's the reason why we can then use this view, item view dot find. Look at that. Now we can say find view by ID and say r.id dot say we call name, right? Contact name. I'm going to do the same thing with phone number, item find r.id dot phone number. Very good. There we go. Now we have all of our widgets that we created in our contact row inside of our view holder constructor here in our view holder class, which is again being used. This is very important. When we actually say on create view, we're passing that view into our view holder. That's why we're able to get all that information, set everything up. Very good. We're going to use all of this inside of our onBind in a second here. So while we're here, I'm going to return the actual size of our array, which means our data source. How do we get that? Well, at the top here, we have created this contact list, which will hold contacts. So that's what we need, right? So we need the size of it. Simply, we just say return contact list.size. And that's all for our get item count. That's all. Okay, very good. So now the onBind view here. Remember, the onBind view is where we are binding the views and the data, right? So we have the views that we were able to instantiate inside of our view holder class, right? Inside of our view holder constructor. So we have now each item, each one of these guys, all right? So onBind view now, because remember, if you go up here on bind view holder, notice that we are passing our view holder class here as just a parameter. And of course, we're passing int, which is going to be the position of each item as we create those rows in our user interface. Okay. So at this point here, if we have our view holder class we created here, which is this one, which means we have access to the contact number, contact name, and phone number, and whatever else we added here. That means we can do now all the things that we're supposed to do to bind everything together so that then the view is shown with data like this, with the real data. So each row now is ready to be shown, right? So that's where all happens here. So then how do we get things set up? Well, first of all, we need to think a little bit here. So we said at the top here, we have our contact list, which is a list containing all of the contacts objects, right? So we need to get one object at a time and set it up. Meaning we need to get in one contact object at a time so we can set up the name and the phone number. Makes sense. How do we do that? Well, from a list that contains a lot of objects, how do we get one particular object at a certain point in time? Well, look at this. Remember this int I? I can change this to position. Like that, doesn't matter, right? So this I here, it's going to be our index for each object that we are looping through inside of our contact list, right? So at this point here, I'm going to go ahead and create a contact object. Make sure it's contact object, and you can see because it has the package name that we created. There we go. And I'm going to say contact. I'm going to say is equal to what? Well, I can't say new contact like this because we're not creating a new object. We're just instantiating what is already there, meaning we're getting what we have already from a list of contacts. So I'm going to say contact list that we saw at the top we created here. Okay. And we know that this contact list will have objects of type list. So we're going to get one of them at this point, right? So I'm going to say dot get, because it's a list, I have this get where we pass index. Well, where is this index? The index is this position here, right? So now we have each contact object inside of our list. So each time it goes, let's say if position is 0 at first, it's going to go and get the first object and make it a contact. If the position is 1, it's going to go create the second one and so forth. So as we go through, it's going to go and get all of these around like that. So now that we have our contact object, we can do all sort of things, right? One of which is important, what we're doing inside of our onBind view holder here, is to bind the holder and also the data. So we know we can access the view holder, which contains all of these items here. So I can actually come here. In fact, I can say view holder. This view holder here, I can access all sort of things. Look at that. I can access the phone number, and it tells you is a type text view, which is exactly correct, right? That's why I made this public so that they're easy for me to access inside of this, right? And on view holder constructor here, we are instantiating them, right? Creating them, pulling in the ID. So we actually have the object, so we can do all sort of things. That means now I can just say dot phone number and then dot set text like that and pass in the text. What text are we going to pass? Well, for phone number, it's going to be contact, because remember this object has the get method of phone number. Voila. And I can actually come do the same thing with the contact name, that set text, and pass in our contact, that get, not context, contact, that's why, that get name, just like that. There we go. So at this point here, that's all we're doing. When onBind view is called, it knows that it has to pass the view holder and the position of this current item here. So it knows all of this stuff beforehand. And for us here, we're going to create a contact object, but that's what's needed. And to get these objects, well, we have the contact list, which at this point will have all of the contact objects inside of there. Because it's an array list, it's a list, we can use the get method and pass in the position, which is the index. So each time it's going to go loop through and create all of those contacts. And we are setting them up with our view holder and set the text to the actual name for each contact, as well as the phone number. Very good. So at this point, really, guys, we are done with our RecyclerView adapter. Let's give this a try and see how can we instantiate it and get something going here. Let's go back to main activity here. Well, we know that in our activity here, we have this RecyclerView. So we have to instantiate it as well inside of our main activity, just like we did with ListView. In fact, I'm going to just get rid of this because we don't need that. I'm going to say private. There is a RecyclerView like that, called RecyclerView. And the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to say private. I'm going to call our RecyclerView adapter. So RecyclerView adapter that we created. And I'll call this RecyclerView adapter like that. very good. So let's go inside here. I'm going to say RecyclerView is equal to find by ID r.id.recyclerView. Let's see. I don't think we have actually given this an ID. Let's double click here and find ID. Let's go look attributes. Doesn't look like. Let me comment this out for a second. It's giving some errors here. All right, let's come down here and look to see if we can add an ID here. Let's just add an ID from here because it's not giving me the opportunity. I'm going to call this RecyclerView like that. Okay, save that. Back to main. Let's uncomment this. .RecyclerView. There we go. So now we pull it in. And next, what I'm going to do at the bottom here is I'm going to go ahead and say, let's get rid of all this code that we had previously. Okay, let's get rid of that. And next thing I'm going to do right after that, I'm going to set things up for our RecyclerView. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to say RecyclerView dot set has fixed size. So this will allow for the RecyclerView to make sure that everything is correct in terms of the sizing and managing all of those layouts. Okay, so just say true here. And next I'm going to say RecyclerView again dot set layout manager. Now the reason why we need to pass layout manager, because as you saw in the previous video when I was introducing RecyclerViews in the presentation, the layout manager knows all that needs to be known about laying things out in such a way that it's efficient and in a way that it also follows this view holder pattern that we're talking about, right? So all we need to do, just say that. I'm going to say new linear manager like that and pass this. So once you do that, it will know exactly what to do. So you don't have to do anything else. We're setting this layout manager in our RecyclerView so it knows how to get things done. Okay. In this case, it's going to be linear layout manager, not relative layout manager, because we want things to be linearly shown on the screen, just like this, top to bottom. Okay. Very good. So now that we have that, we are set at least for our RecyclerView widget there. So the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to set up adapter. So we have our recycler adapter. I'm going to just instantiate it. I'm going to say new recycler adapter like that. So we have to pass a few things because we said when we created this RecyclerView adapter that we have to pass the context. I'm just going to say this, or rather main activity.this, doesn't really matter. And I'm going to pass the list contact. We have that already. It's called the contact array list. In fact, we have created earlier here. In this case here, we're going to have an issue because this is an array list of strings, and we want to make sure that the actual should be array list of white contacts. So I'm going to change that to context like that, and we should be good. Now, this is not going to work because we are going to be passing the actual object contact like that. All right. So we changed a few things here because we've changed the way the data that we're receiving, the types of it. Earlier, we just wanted it to be a string because we were just showing one thing only, which was the name. But at this point here, we're just passing an object so that we can do things already. Very good. So notice also we need to change the order in which things are done here. Let me move all of this stuff and put them around here. Of course, this as well, because the database is instantiated there. Okay, there we go. So just removing things around so that things actually work. So we have our contact list. It's an array list. We instantiate our database. We create a contact list to get all of the lists, and we loop through them. This is from previous videos. And our contact list now, which we've changed now to hold the contact object, which is what we needed. And as we loop through, we are adding all the contacts inside of our contact array list, which is indeed needed when we use or instantiate our RecyclerView adapter. All right. So at this point here, now that I have our RecyclerView, I need to set things up with our recycler. So I'm going to say RecyclerView dot set what? Adapter. And I pass our RecyclerView adapter like that. So the same thing we did before with a list view is the same thing essentially what we're doing with a few differences, right? But the idea is that we create our RecyclerView, we instantiate it, we said we have to pass the context, remember? Look at that, we have to pass the context. And we also said that we have to pass the data that needs to be taken so that we can actually create the rows. So once we pass this, which is going to be passed around so that we can then look at this, use that to create a contact name and phone number, etc. All right. Very good. So at this point here, we are ready to rock and roll if all goes well, right? So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And first time for the longest time, I'm going to run this. Let's see if we're going to get what we're looking for. If all goes well, of course, fingers crossed. And we see nothing. Oh, we actually see something. Oh, voila. Not the way we want it to, but looks like there's a lot of spaces around here. But at least we can see that things are indeed working. Look at that. Right? Very good. So there's few things we need to do, the paddings and so forth, but it's fine. So at least things are working and our adapter is actually doing what it's supposed to do. Now let's fix this because that's not how RecyclerViews show their data. So this is mostly cosmetics that we're having issues with here. Let's go ahead and fix this real quick. We go back to our contact row, and instead of having the root of this whole thing to say match parent, we're just going to go ahead and say wrap content. So this will just use enough space, which is exactly what we want. So let's run again. And voila, we can see now it's working much, much better. Okay, it's still not the best. So next video, we're going to work on our cosmetics here real quick, right? Because at this point, it just doesn't look quite right. No problem. Those are just cosmetics and we're going to change them in the next video. But for now, congratulations, because you were able to see all of the items in a RecyclerView.